Let's bring on my friend Tarrant County Sheriff Bill Waybourn, who has been talking to us about these issues. Sheriff, God bless you. We always pray for the safety of you and those serving and protecting with you. Thanks for giving us some of your time today.
Oh, it's an honor to always be with you, Dana.
Well,
thank you.
I appreciate what you do. Tell me, because first off, we're in this pandemic. We're in a lockdown, which I don't think anybody's worried about now. At least we'll find out, how contagious it was, I guess, here in a week or so. But we were in a lockdown. Everyone was already pushed to the limit anyway. Business owners were already struggling. Those who had made it through by the grace of God and were reopening again, a lot of them had to close down again because they were worried about damage and threats of or the safety of their employees or anything of that nature. And to try to police this and de-escalate the situation, I've never envied less the position of you and others in law enforcement. How have you been assessing and dealing with this situation in your capacity in Tarrant County?
Well, you're right. First of all, you're absolutely right. A pandemic that drives our businesses to the knees, and then we have people showing up wanting to drive them to the ground, is just absolutely ridiculous. But we in Tarrant County and in Fort Worth, our county seat, are doing well. And Fort Worth PD has done a marvelous job, and we've worked hand in hand with them along with the Department of Public Safety. And we've had several nights of protest, and we only had one that got a little bit out of hand, and we in Fort Worth took immediate action. There was probably less than 50 arrests and a little bit of property damage, and we were good to go. And then last night it swelled to about 500 people, but once the curfew was implemented, they were staring off at police. But Ed Krause from Fort Worth PD just wandered into the crowd and asked them that magic question: "What is it you want?" And they said, "We want to be heard." And he said, "We've heard you." And he says, and somebody asked him to pray with them, and he prayed with them, and that crowd dispersed. But I think, that's typical Fort Worth. And by the way, after they dispersed, they were at our old courthouse. They policed up the area. The protesters made sure all the trash was picked up, and they left it as good or better than they found it. So that's what we're seeing here. I know that Arlington had a little bit more difficult, and certainly Dallas and then across the country has been ugly. But we've got to figure out, first of all, that question of why. But secondly, we also got an organization across the country that is trying to radicalize and use this opportunity to fire up folks and just loot and burn.
Yeah. What do you make of some of the accusations that people have said that this is, and I wonder this myself, whether or not this is, it's nationally organized. I know there were all kinds of reports yesterday of these pallets of bricks that were just being left like randomly all over in these different areas. What do you know about that, and what kind of how much credibility do you give the accusations that it's really ultimately like nationally organized like this?
Well, I think that there's some loose active stuff going on nationally. I wouldn't say it was well organized, but they certainly have planted the seeds across the nation. We have had intelligence reports of bricks being dropped off. We haven't found any. We have looked, and that we never have confirmed any of that. But I will tell you that the protesters themselves on Saturday night where we had an outbreak, those folks were even telling us, "Listen, we came here to peacefully protest, and people showed up from out of town and caused this problem."
Yeah.
So that's happening. That is happening.
How many of them from out of town in your capacity in your jurisdiction as Tarrant County Sheriff? How much I guess contact have you had with protesters where they were telling you, how many of these people were coming in from out of town? I mean, do you know, like a percentage wise? Can you estimate?
I could estimate, but it'd be surely just speculative that 5 or 10% of them are instigators from other places. And of the people we arrested, there were, of the 40 people, maybe a half a dozen to a dozen that were from well out of town, and I'm saying, an hour away or 2 hours
Right.
away, or from Dallas or Louisville.
Right. Are we at the point where, because I know National Guard's been called in, I know the president has said outright that he's put military on 4 hours notice, and do you think that that's going to be necessary, or do you think that maybe the more reinforced response that we saw last night from a number of different cities around the country, is that going to be enough to stem the tide of violence and destruction?
I hope that last night that we're on the right track. I know we had violence. I mean, my God, we had 7 police officers shot across the country and one fighting for his life in Vegas. But I'm hoping that last night, the show of force that occurred with the outlaws, that's going to get it done. Now, we expect them back this evening, so that it's kind of like time will tell and how we get there. But I'm hoping that some of this will settle down, and hopefully be settled down before we're looking at the 82nd Airborne.
Oh my gosh, I would hope not. And I realize too, with all the self-defense stuff that I've done, I don't know, how many hours of classes my husband and I have taken and my family's gone through, and every single class they always say your first responsibility, because you are improving your skills and because you're carrying, is de-escalation. Every single class I have ever taken, that has always been reinforced. And I was wondering, how is that even applied in a situation where you're trying to separate, which I can't imagine how difficult that is initially. You're trying to protect the peaceful protesters who are being undermined and exploited by violent rioters, and you're trying to protect business owners and innocent citizens from the rioters and also de-escalate the situation. How do you even approach that? How do you even approach de-escalation when you have all the germination of a riot?
Well, I'll tell you, it is very, very difficult. But what we have found, what I've seen here firsthand, is that we talk to these people early on, and we begin to try to separate the wheat from the chaff very early on. And at the first sign of trouble is when we move in. That's when force was beginning to be used. And when I say force, tear gas, smoke grenades, those kind of things at the first sign of trouble. But before that, we, not me personally, well, I was in yesterday, but a little bit, but officers were in the crowd visiting with them, trying to create a relationship with them, trying to figure out who the agitators were, and in some cases being able to identify them. And I think last night in Fort Worth, we only had one arrest out of the whole thing, out of 500 people. And that's because, they got out of line someplace. But that I credit Fort Worth PD for being in that crowd and talking to them.
Last question for you. We're talking to Tarrant County Sheriff Bill Waybourn. Sheriff, would it be helpful for police if local protesters, and for those listening, I'm not positioning this as a way of them asking permission, but rather to thwart the rioters, that especially those coming in from out of town that'd like to undermine and exploit stuff? Would it be helpful if protesters reached out to local law enforcement and said, look, this is who we are, this is what we're going to be doing, so that if stuff breaks out and you have violent people come out, this is going to help you better identify these rioters who are also busting up our community? Is that in any way helpful, or what would you say to protesters as a way to ensure that they're able to exercise their First Amendment, so that these rioters and protecting people from rioters and separating that? What would you have them do?
I think exactly that. And by the way, that is happening. It's in some of our cities, and people are reaching out and saying, hey, we're going to be protesting on June 5th at such and such time, and this is us, and we're not here to hurt anybody or hurt anything. And what's your rules of engagement? And they're meeting with police chiefs and police officials all over the county to do that. And that's excellent. That's absolutely excellent.
Very good. I'm very happy to hear that. Tarrant County Sheriff Bill Waybourn, we're going to be, we'll continue to keep you all in prayer for safety, and Godspeed as you serve and protect and keep law and order. We appreciate your time, Sheriff.